Good morning, boys and girls. My name is Edward Barta, and I really welcome you to today's art and a story lesson. I'm so happy you're here today because we get to do a couple of things I really enjoy doing a lot, and one of them is sharing my enthusiasm for children's literature, and the second thing is being able to share with you some of the art we have at the Docent Art Museum. So before we begin reading the story, I'd like to have you look over here at this piece of art we have behind me. Let's talk about this for a while here. Now this art is made by an artist whose name is Deborah Butterfield. And Deborah Butterfield has had a passion for art ever since she was a little girl. And so almost everything she does in art has to do with horses. And as you can see, this horse it's made out of metal, and it has things in here which look like they might be letters, and I know that some of you are studying your letters, so look at this and see if you can see some of the letters that you might notice. Check it out a little bit here. Okay, one of the letters you might notice is this letter right here, is the letter E. This letter down here could be the letter perhaps B, or maybe even a Y, and then down here is the letter C. And there might be some other letters. There might be some other letters too. So, with that in mind, I'd like to begin reading to you this book. Now, before I begin this book, the name of this book is called The Mitten. And some of you may have heard this story before, but most of you probably have not heard this story before. But it is about a mitten, and it is about a little boy whose name is Nikolai, and his grandmother whose name is Baba. And his grandmother has made him some mittens. I would imagine that maybe some of you have grandmothers or maybe aunties or whatever who have made you mittens. These mittens were made, actually they were just finished by a friend of mine, and it took her about 10 hours to make these mittens. And they're made out of fabric, and a little bit later on in today's lesson we're going to look at some art which is made by fabric and talk about fabric art a little bit. Now one of the things about mittens is that people tend to lose mittens. Now, I don't know if many of you have lost mittens, but I suspect quite a few of you have. And the thing about losing mittens is it seems like for some strange reason, you don't lose them both. You just lose one mitten. So, and that's kind of what happens in this story. Nikolai loses one of his mittens, and I want you to pay attention to what happens to that mitten after he loses it. All right, ready to go here? One of the nice things about this book, too, is that it has some really beautiful pictures in it. So I'll share those pictures with you as we go along. All right. Once there was a boy named Nicky who wanted his new mittens made from wool as white as snow. I wonder why he would want his mittens so white. It seemed like that would be not a good color. At first, his grandma Baba did not want to knit white mittens. If you drop one in the snow, she warned, you'll never find it. But Nicky wanted snow white mittens, and finally Baba made them. And after she finished, she said, when you come home, first, I will look to see if you are safe and sound, but then I will look to see if you still have your snow white mittens. And so up Nicky went, and it wasn't long until one of his new mittens dropped in the snow and was left behind. Can you find the mitten on there? Right down there. You can hardly see it, huh, because it's white. So let's see what happens to that mitten. A mole, tired from tunneling along, discovered the mitten and burrowed inside. It was cozy and warm and just the right size, so he decided to stay. And so here you can see the mole climbing into the mitten, and he decided to stay. A snowshoe rabbit came hopping by. He stopped for a moment to admire his winter coat. It was then that he saw the mitten, and he wiggled in feet first. The mole didn't think there was room for both of them, but when he saw the rabbit's big kickers, he moved over. So now you can see the rabbit and the mole are sharing it. Kind of cozy in there. Next, a hedgehog came snuffling along. Having spent the day looking under wet leaves for something to eat, he decided to move into the mitten and warm himself. The mole and the rabbit were bumped and jostled, but not being ones to argue with someone covered with prickles, they made room. See the hedgehog there? It's kind of hard to see it there, but the hedgehogs are kind of interesting animals. I don't think we have hedgehogs around here. Kind of tight in that mitten. As soon as the hedgehog disappeared in the mitten, a big owl, attracted by the motion, swooped down. When he decided to move in also, the mole, the rabbit, and the hedgehog grumbled. And when they saw the owl's glinty talons, they quickly let him in. That big old owl there, I wouldn't want to mess with him. Up through the snow appeared a badger. He eyed the mittens and began to climb in. The mole, the rabbit, the hedgehog, and the owl were not pleased. There was no room left, but when they saw his big diggers, they gave him the thumb and let him in. It started snowing, but the animals were snug in the mitten. A waft of warm steam air rose in the air, and a fox trotted by and decided to investigate. Just the sight of the cozy mitten made him feel drowsy. The fox poked his nozzles in, and when the mole, the rabbit, the hedgehog, and the owl, and the badger saw his shiny teeth, they gave the fox lots of room. Just look at all those animals in that mitten. Just can't imagine how they all fit in there. A great bear lumbered by. He spied the mitten all pumped up. Not being one to be left out in the cold, he began to nose his way in. The animals were packed in as tightly as could be, but what animal could argue with a bear? The mitten swelled and stretched, it was pulled and bulged to many times its size, but Baba's good knitting held fast. Just imagine a bear getting into that mitten. Ooh. And along came a meadow mouse. No bigger than an acorn, she wiggled into the one space left and made herself comfortable on top of the great bear's nose. You see that little mouse over here on top of the big bear? The bear, tickled by the whiskers of the mouse, gave an enormous sneeze. Achoo! The force of the sneeze shot the mitten up into the sky and scattered the animals in all directions. Well, on his way home, Nicky saw a white shape in the distance. It was the lost mitten silhouetted against the blue sky. there's the Mitten again. And as he ran to catch his snow-white mitten, he saw Baba's face in the window. First, she looked to see if he was safe and sound, and then she saw that he still had his new mittens. And that's the end. Now look at the picture of the grandmother, Baba. I wonder what she's thinking. One of those mittens is a lot bigger than the other one, isn't it? And that's the end of the story. So, this story has many, many different animals in it. So let's see if we can remember all of them. So remember the first one was the mole, and then the rabbit, and then, I'm not sure which one was next, the hedgehog, and then the owl, and then a badger, and then a fox, and then a bear, and then a mouse. So quite a few different animals in this story. So we are going to look at some of the artwork in this museum, and you're going to see that we have many examples of animals in this museum and some of the artwork. And probably one of the reason for that is because artists paint what they like. And as you can tell, many artists just love animals, and so they make artwork out of those animals, such as we have with Ferdinand here. So let's look at Ferdinand just a little bit more before we look at some of the other art. Now, I'm going to teach you a really big word. Some of you might know what this word is, but the name of this word is called sculpture. And Ferdinand is an example of art, which is a sculpture. Now, the best way to understand a sculpture is it's kind of a piece of artwork that you can move all the way around. If you could move all the way around this art, and you can see this art from every side, from over here, all the way over here. You can see it on all different sides, can't you? Now, before we look at some of the other art here, I am going to share with you a poem. I used to be a teacher quite a few years ago, and I used to love sharing poems with students. And this poem kind of is about this horse. And some of your parents, or maybe your grandparents, remember there used to be a TV show called Mr. Ed on TV. And Mr. Ed was a horse, and he was interesting because he could talk. So Mr. Ed was kind of the talking horse. So I'm going to just kind of tell you the poem and see if you can learn it really quickly, and then we're going to actually sing the way it was sung during the TV series. So this is the poem. A horse is a horse, of course. That is, unless the horse, of course, is the famous Mr. Ed. So let's try it again. A horse is a horse, of course. That is, unless, of course, the horse is the famous Mr. Ed. Now, you think you can sing that along with me? Good thing my grandchildren are not here because they do not like to hear me sing. So they're not here. So I'm going to sing to you the way this song was when it was on the TV series, okay? A horse is a horse, of course. That is, unless, of course, the horse is the famous Mr. Ed. A horse is a horse, of course. That is, unless, of course, is the famous Mr. Ed. So that poem obviously goes with this horse. And one of the things about that poem is once you get it in your head, it's pretty darn difficult to get out of your head. I've been thinking about that poem, seemed like all day long, and I just cannot seem to get it out of my head. All right, with that in mind, we're going to then go on a little tour of the art museum here, and we're going to look at some of the other animals that we have as artwork here. And again, there are many such examples. And we're also going to go into a room that has mostly fabric art in it, because as I mentioned earlier, these gloves or these mittens are made out of fabric. So, all right, here we go. I'm going to share with you this art, This again is a sculpture. Again, remember, because we can walk around this sculpture and you can see on both sides. So here's an example of a sculpture. And it is art made by an artist whose name is Brad Rule. And if you're Brad Ruby instead. So if you were to look at this fairly carefully, you will be able to identify quite a few animals on this, in this art. So let's see if we can't find some animals. So we all know what this is. It's a cow. And this is kind of another kind of a cow over here, maybe a bull. And then we have, I think, like a wolf, an elephant. Is that a wolf? Another kind of coyote, a lion, a buffalo, and then it looks like a deer. Now, quite a few of these animals are animals that we have around here. Some of them we don't have around here. But, and again, this is made out of metal, a little bit like the metal called brass, a little bit like Ferdinand. So many, many different animals on this sculpture. So we're just going to kind of walk through this. Some of these you can see a little bit better. So these, you can't see them really clearly, but these are cows. The artist's name is Isabel Johnson. She is a very famous artist around here. You look over here. Again, these are examples of sculptures because you can look at them from all different angles. And these are partridges. And the artist's name is Francis Senska. Again, it looks like chartreuse-like animals. Here, Jesse Wilbur is the artist. This over here is probably most everybody's favorite animal, a dog. Jenny DeVries is the artist here. I've seen quite a few different pieces of art that she has done, and a number of them have to do with dogs. This is another one of her pieces of art up here. Now, one of the differences between these two is that it's not really clear what these are. You can't really tell what these are, but they're more than likely animals. So it's kind of up to you, the viewer, to decide what those look like. When I first looked at them, I thought they might be cats. But then when I found out that it was Jenny DeVries was the artist, I knew that she does a lot of dogs, so I think that they could be dogs. So some art, one of the differences is that that's more realistic art, and this is a little bit more difficult to see and understand what it is, and that's called abstract art. It's a little bit difficult to understand for younger kids. All right, so let's move over here into this section. Again, we have some more sculptures. I can walk around those sculptures, and those sculptures are sculptures of what? They're sheep, aren't they? Like a lamb, and then a bigger lamb. So I'll bet maybe a third of the art we have in this museum sometimes has to do with animals. Again, we have horses. And one of the things about this artist, if you look at this art more closely, his name is Theodore Waddell. When he paints, he likes to use big, heavy strokes of paint, big chunks of paint. So if you look at this closely, you can see the big, heavy strokes of paint there. Big chunks of paint. I'll bet when he paints, he just makes a mess. See how heavy use of big chunks of paint. And this one over here is kind of the same way. Doesn't have animals in it, but just look at the way he uses paint. Big, heavy use of the brush strokes. And let's see this over here again. It's another Theodore Waddell, and again, you can't really tell what those animals are, but they definitely are animals, and you probably would know that they, I suspect, are going to be cows again. And again, you can see that big, heavy heavy texture of paint that we'll actually use. It's kind of like when you paint, boys and girls, some of you like to probably just use a little bit of paint on your paintbrush, and then some of you like that big globs of paint that you use, probably like the big globs of paint, make a big mess, and that's kind of the way this artist paints, big globs of paint. Okay, now this is another sculpture. This is ceramics or pottery, and it's kind of hard to figure out what this is unless you look at it like almost all the way around. So I'll have Carrie look at it all the way around and see if you can figure out what kind of animal this might look like. All right. I'll bet some of you have some ideas about what this art looks like in terms of the kind of animals you have. Definitely have a person figure on it, but you also have, in my mind, horses. Some people might even think, well, that's kind of the shape of an elephant ears. So sometimes we have different ideas about what might be in this art. Over here, we have some more cows. So why do you think it is, boys and girls, that many of the pieces of art we have in here have either cows or horses? Are there a lot of cows and horses around Montana? There are, aren't there? So many of these are Montana artists, and so that's why we have some of the cows and horses, because again, we paint what we see and we paint what we like. And so these people are doing exactly that. All right, if that's it in this room, let's check this room over here. This artist's name is Will James, and he not only is an artist, but he also used to write books. And so many of the books that he would write, having to do with kind of Western cowboy ideas, would have some of these pictures in those books. But many of his paintings had horses in them. And since he was a cowboy, he really knew horses well, and so you could tell that his paintings were pretty accurate. They were pretty realistic about what horses look like. So with that, we're going to go upstairs and look at what we have up there for animals. Remember, boys and girls, we talked about these mittens down below, talked about the idea they're made out of fabric, and this artist, Brooke Atherton, has art in here which is almost exclusively made out of different kinds of fabric. So let's go in here and look at this. These over here, this is quilt-like fabric, quilt-like art. And I would imagine that maybe your mother or your grandmother or somebody like that makes quilts. And so that's one of the very common kinds of art that we have in Montana, is quilt making. There's some beautiful examples of that in here. And of course, we have some really small examples here of using different kinds of fabric. So this whole room is filled of artwork that's made with fabric from the teepee, to all of these really interesting things over here. And then of course she made this, speaking of animals and insects, she made this butterfly, moths made out of fabric. And she also made that teddy bear out of fabric. So everything in here is made out of fabric. Mittens were made out of fabric. Some more fabric out here. It's really beautiful seeing the light shine through these pieces of artwork. In the last room upstairs, now, during an earlier lesson of art and the story, the reader brought you in here and showed you quite a few pieces in here of this show. But I don't know, over here we have lots and lots of birds, again, some more animals with their shadows, the interaction of the shadows was really cool. Just imagine how long it takes to create each one of these birds. It took her a long time. And then out here we have, again, a couple of sculptures. And these are baby calves. They're very sweet. Now, one of the things that the Art Museum has too is we sometimes have exhibits from students, and from students like your ages all the way up through high school students. And so I might take you downstairs and show you some of the artwork the high school students have made. And again, you're going to end up seeing some more animals. So boys and girls, this art that's in this room is made by students from Shepherd High School. And so these are older students than what you are, but when you get to be older, you'll be able to have art in here too. But we have art in here from kindergarten students all the way up to high school students. So at some point, perhaps you'll be able to get some of your art in here. So let's just look at a couple of these pieces. So this is again a sculpture. So you can walk around it, and as you can tell, it looks like the remnants of a shark or a big dish. Kind of a scary creature there. And then over here, we have an elephant. And this elephant doesn't look like your normal elephant because half of it has beautiful flowers in it and that kind of stuff. So really nice composition there. And then of course, everybody's favorite animal is snake. Looks like a rattlesnake. And again, looks like, because we have rattlesnakes in Montana. And so, people paint what they know. So that sort of concludes today's lesson. I really wanted to tell you how much I enjoyed speaking with you about this art. I encourage you to come to the Art Museum and kind of show your parents and other friends the kind of art we have here. And I want to leave you with one final message. Don't lose any of your mittens. You'll be in big trouble.